Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of the FTC radio podcast. This is your host, Isaac Chase, and today I want to talk to the students out there. I want to talk about why training is important. Now, this is a broad topic, and it really could go in a bunch of different directions, but one of the ways that I like to get into it is to talk about something that a lot of people are familiar with, but they don't really think of it in terms of training and practice, and that is driving a car. Most people who own guns also have a driver's license and either access to a car or they have their own car. Now, you wouldn't probably think of your car as a self-defense weapon, and in most circumstances, it's really not. But what your car is a somewhat complex machine that you operate on the roads, sometimes at high speeds, and that really is dangerous if you stop and think about it. The car you're driving weighs anywhere between 2 and, let's say, 5,000 pounds, maybe heavier, depending on what you drive. And you take it on the highway, and you've got it going at speeds of up to 70, 80 miles an hour. And as if that wasn't hard enough, you have people all around you doing the same thing. And some of those people are not paying attention. Some of those people are aggressive. Some of those people are not very skilled. And so it's your job to watch out for those people and to not let them bump into you and for you not to bump into them. And if you really break it down and think about it, it's pretty dangerous. In fact, it's probably the most dangerous way that people travel. And you're sharing the road with a whole bunch of people who you have no idea how seriously they take that, whether or not they're texting or whether or not they're eating or sometimes reading a book, or if you're driving a Tesla, maybe you were taking a nap. So it takes quite a bit of concentration and skill to safely drive. And if you think about it, you do it all the time. You're putting yourself in a dangerous situation daily, if not daily, at least weekly. You know, some people, some gun owners may not drive all that often, but maybe you get into a car with somebody else who's driving, and I would bet that you do that more than once a week. So, how do we compare firearms and cars? Well, if you break down the complexity of operating a car and operating a firearm, they're not all that different from each other as far as the level of complexity. Now, operating a handgun is really nothing like operating a car in the specifics of the controls and how you pull the trigger and how you start the car and all of that stuff. None of it is really the same, but the level of complexity between the two is not that far off. When you first learned how to drive, depending on your confidence level, you were probably a little bit apprehensive, and you almost definitely had no idea what you were doing the first time you got behind the wheel of a car. Maybe that was in driver's ed, maybe that was on the farm, maybe you stole your parents' car and took it out for a joyride. But the point is the first few times that you did it, you really didn't know what you were doing. Now, whether or not that scared you or intimidated you kind of depends on your temperament and your risk averseness. Averseness, is that a word? Anyway, your acceptance of the risk. For me personally, I was pretty apprehensive when I first started driving, but then I got pretty confident pretty quickly. Probably too confident. Definitely too confident. If you look at my driving record, way too confident. But the point is that you really didn't know what you were doing. You had to get acquainted with it. And getting acquainted with it meant driving every day. Or maybe if you started when you were 15, you drove every couple of days with mom or dad while you were getting your permit. Or maybe you drove on the farm every day and then you started driving on the roads. The point is that you've got some level of practice, if not every day, almost every day. And as you became more acquainted with the vehicle, your practice became ingrained in your daily activities. You don't think about it this way, but when you get in your car to drive, you're actually practicing and training the whole time you're in the car. And if you think about a new inexperienced driver who has learned how to operate a car but has not learned how to master the car, when they get into a situation that they've never been in, or they get into a situation where an accident could happen or is about to happen, oftentimes they don't know what to do because they're inexperienced with it. They are panicked, overwhelmed. If not panicked, at least overwhelmed by everything's going on around them. Everything that's going on with the car, everything that's going on with anybody else on the road, and overwhelmed with everything involved. And most likely they're going to end up crashing. Might not be a spectacular crash, but it's not going to be a good outcome. But if you've been driving for 20 years and those same sets of circumstances happen to you, let's use the example where you're driving on the interstate or the highway and the traffic in front of you stops abruptly and your reaction time wasn't as fast as it could or should have been, or you were not following with enough space between you and the vehicle in front of you, so you're not going to have time to stop. A lot of times an experienced driver will quickly and without even thinking about it either check the mirrors or will have already checked the mirrors to know what their options are for leaving the lane that they're in and going into an unoccupied lane to avoid the accident. Now, if you've ever seen anybody do this, you probably have, seen a vehicle dive over into maybe onto the shoulder or something like that. And you're like, wow, they weren't paying attention. It's a good thing they didn't hit that car in front of them. But that reaction is really more built on experience than it is cognitive thoughts, because your brain doesn't have time usually to process that kind of information very quickly. Now, there's varying degrees of this. Sometimes this all happens in half a second. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 seconds to develop. And, there's gray areas here. But the point is that over time, when you practice driving every single day, especially if you drive the same car for a long time, you really get to know all the circumstances around driving. Now, your brain can't possibly keep up with everything, every experience that you've ever had, everything you've ever seen. But what your brain starts to do is build these subconscious or unconscious pathways for dealing with different problems, maybe even before you really think about dealing with these problems. Now, as you get older and your mental faculties start to decline, this kind of goes downhill. But for most of your life, most of your driving life, you're actually training, not just practicing every time you get behind the wheel of the car. It doesn't feel like that, but you're putting these pathways into your brain that are learned pathways that you're not even really aware that you're learning. Some people are better at this than others. Some people have more experience. Some people's brains react better to this. Some people are able to pick up on other things that maybe some people don't pick up on. But the point is that to the capacity that you are able to process this information and act on it, you are training yourself, and you're doing it constantly. And you get out and you share the road with other people who are doing the same thing. To me, it's a miracle that there aren't more accidents. To me, it's a miracle that more people aren't just running into each other all the time. If you know the physics behind vehicles, cars, mass and velocity, and the car next to you, if something goes wrong, that car is not going to stop. That car is going to continue in a straight line until it hits something. So maybe they get a flat tire and they spin out and go in front of you. Maybe they hit something in the road and then they end up in front of you. The point is that keeping these vehicles in the lane and following all the traffic rules and paying attention to everything that's going on around you is actually a fairly complex set of skills. It's why it's taken these companies like Tesla so long to develop the technology to have these cars drive themselves. And the cars that drive themselves, arguably, they have a better attention span than you do, but they're not able to process all the information going on in the road like you are. Your brain is a very powerful computer, and it's capable of some pretty unbelievable things. And driving is one of those things. But you've been doing it so long that it doesn't really intimidate you. For most people, driving is not an intimidating thing. It's more, if anything, an inconvenience than anything else. But it's not intimidating to go to work, get in your car and drive to work. It's not intimidating for you to run to the grocery store and pick up some food. It's not even intimidating for you to get on the highway and drive, an hour to go see some family members for the holidays. It's not intimidating because you've practiced it so much that so much of the skills involved are subconscious that you don't even think about them. When we talk about firearms, the number of different things that you have to pay attention to safely operate a firearm are similar to the number of things that you have to pay attention to when you're driving a car. The primary difference is, normally, when you are operating a firearm, it's in a safe environment. So there's only one direction where everybody's supposed to be shooting. There's no bad guys around. And everybody's agreed on the rules for the area. Now, not everybody follows them, but generally speaking, the rules are agreed upon, and you don't have to worry about all the other people around you with their guns so much. Not to say you shouldn't worry at all, but in general, you can basically take it for granted that everybody's going to shoot in the right direction. I mean, if you couldn't take it for granted, why were you even at that range in the first place? But when we talk about self-defense, that's not really the case. In a self-defense situation, really anything goes. Bullets may be traveling in more than one direction. There might be more than one bad guy. There might be more than one good guy. And it gets a little bit complex. But the actual skills of operating the gun are not that different in complexity with operating a car. But you get people who buy a gun for self-defense, who never handle the gun, who never go to the range, who never take a training class. And when they pick up the gun, if they're not apprehensive, then they're at least not competent. Now, they may be assured of themselves. They may trust their own abilities, maybe incorrectly. But at a minimum, they're not trained and practiced at what they're doing. So you see these guys when you go to the range. They get a malfunction, and their primary tactic for solving the malfunction, their primary strategy here is to stop what they're doing, look at the gun, try to diagnose the problem, ask for help. Maybe they will start jiggling the gun around. They'll start trying different things that might work to fix the malfunction, but they're not really sure what they're doing. And that malfunction can stop them for a couple of minutes. You see the same thing with loading and unloading the gun. It takes time for them to load and unload the gun because they're not really sure of the order of operations. They're not sure of the technique. They don't treat it in a subconscious way because they haven't built the skill over time with training and practice. Yet these people will buy this gun and keep this gun and either carry it for self-defense or they'll keep it at home for self-defense. And they believe that magically they'll know what to do when the time comes. They'll know how to aim. They'll know how to grip. They'll know how to operate the gun. They'll know how to load the gun. They'll know how to clear a malfunction. They'll know how to do a reload. Any of these things that you see them fumbling with on the range, They'll just magically know how to do it if the time ever comes. Their level of commitment to practice alone is minimal at best. Going to the range once or twice a year, which is even more than what some people do. Some people go, once every 2 years, once every 3 years. But the point is that they don't take it seriously because they don't understand the value of training and practice. And I'm talking about 99% of gun owners. And, excuse me. I'm talking about 99% of gun owners. Almost all gun owners do not take their training seriously. And it shows when you hang out with these people. Even the people that I see, that I deal with, who do take their training seriously, still do not practice enough to really hone those skills down. Most people who I would consider personal people that I know, who I would consider committed to their training, they still don't practice enough to really solidify those skills into subconscious or unconscious actions. And I give them a lot of credit for putting in more effort, time, and money than 99% of other gun owners. But it just goes to show you that it does take a really high level of commitment in order to build the skills and abilities to handle a gun and to be prepared to use it. Now, I don't necessarily blame them for this because there's not a lot of things that you practice as a skill as much as you do driving. If you really think about your daily life, there's not as many things that you do on a regular daily basis that are as complex as driving and as dangerous as driving. I mean, if you think like, okay, maybe you cook every day. But even when you cook, you don't use the same skills over and over again. Maybe one night you're cutting up fresh beef. You're cutting the cartilage or the fat off a steak. And maybe the next night you're making pasta. And maybe the next night you're nuking some Hot Pockets. But you're not really performing dangerous and complex skills repeatedly every single day. Now, in principle, you're doing the same thing. You're cooking, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same actions. When you get in your car, you put your key in, turn your key on, or turn the car on, turn the key, put the car in drive, or put the car in first gear, or put the car in reverse, check your mirrors, and back out of your driveway. And when you do that, you've just done something that's dangerous enough to kill somebody if you're not paying attention. I mean, if you really think about that, if you've got small kids, you've got neighbors, you could kill them just backing out of your driveway. But you do it so much that your brain goes on autopilot and it's still safe while it does it. Now, your brain shouldn't be 100% on autopilot, but all the physical actions needed to complete that task are on autopilot. The only thing that's not really on autopilot is your processing of the information going on around you, seeing your mirrors, looking over your shoulder, listening for whatever, horn honking or something like that. So there's not a lot of things you do in your life that are like driving, and yet you practice driving a lot. And if you think about it, when you were a teenager, or if you had teenagers, the idea of them driving, let's say you have a nice car, not necessarily even a fast car, let's just say a nice car, something that you value, it's your baby, and the idea of giving the keys to a teenager or an inexperienced driver with your car makes you nervous because you know that they haven't put in the time and the work to learn how to operate a vehicle safely like you have. So it makes you nervous to share the road or share a vehicle with an inexperienced driver. The same should be true for gun owners. We should be holding other gun owners accountable in the same way that we hold people who are driving accountable. Now, that doesn't mean that you go out to the range and as soon as you see somebody do something irresponsible or maybe unskilled, that you start honking and screaming at him and flipping him off like you would behind the wheel of your car while you're out there trying to police the roadways with your vigilante road rage justice. What I mean is, we need to hold our own community accountable. We need to hold everybody responsible for pursuing training seriously, not suggesting training, but making it a way of life for gun owners. Because it's really, really important that we take responsibility for that. You have your rights. You have your right to free speech. You have your right to self-defense. You have the right to be free from being bothered by your government. You have all these rights, but with those rights come responsibilities. And if you are going to exercise your right to own and carry a gun, then with that right comes the responsibility to train. And if you're going to promote shooting, self-defense, buying, carrying weapons, then you need to be promoting training with the same intensity, because it's not as simple as just buying the gun, taking it home, and becoming a master. It really is about training and practice. And I say this all the time to my students. I say it to other people. Training and practice does not always mean you have to go to the range and blow a bunch of money. There's a lot of training and practice that can go on at home, and it doesn't cost you anything but your time. And I would like to talk more about that in future episodes. But the point is that every gun owner has the ability to train. Even if money's tight, you have the ability to train, and you have a responsibility to train. And you take it for granted because nobody's making you do it, but it's imperative. So that's all I wanted to talk about for tonight. Sorry this episode was a day late. Got a little caught up yesterday with other things, and I had to put this off until today. I don't know if I'll be doing an episode next week. Christmas is next week, and I may be on the road. I may not have my equipment with me, and I may not be able to record a podcast, but I'm going to try. And for those of you who have been listening to this show, I really appreciate it. We're working on expanding distribution and make sure it's available everywhere. But right now, I'm mostly focused on just getting these episodes recorded and put out on a regular basis. I don't want to let it lapse, and I don't want to put it off because I don't have everything for distribution all set and perfect. So it's a big deal to me to keep going without letting roadblocks slow me down. So distribution is not where I want it to be right now, but I'm getting the episodes done and I'm getting them out. On that note, you can find this podcast on YouTube, on Gunstreamer, on SoundCloud, on upnnow.com, and at firearmstrainingscentral.com, and on Facebook. That's where I'm hosting, or that's where the episodes are being hosted. You can go find them there. Please, if you're listening, go ahead and click that like button. It helps us out, with the algorithms and all that nonsense. Listen to the last episode for more of that. And please join us next time. I would like to continue the discussion about the responsibility for training. And so we don't have any current sponsors other than our friends. So I'm going to give a shout out to Guns for Everyone in Colorado, which I'm also a part of, and upnnow.com and presscheckmarketing.com. If you're interested in some marketing solutions for your Second Amendment business, check out Press Check Marketing. If you're an instructor, check out firearmstrainingscentral.com. Reach out to us. We can work with you and find ways to help you get the word out, get your classes out. And if you're a student, check out firearmstrainingscentral.com/event-list. And we are working on changing that to something a little bit easier to remember. But we have classes online not online classes. We are we have a list of classes coming up around the country where you can find some excellent training. And if you want to find an instructor near you, you can use our website. You can contact us. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff. Okay, I've wasted enough of your time for now. If we don't talk to you until Christmas, everybody, please have a Merry Christmas and a safe Christmas, and get out there and train. Thank you very much.